Nobody tells you that rich isn't one line you cross. It's 8 of them stacked on top of each other, and almost nobody can tell you which one they're actually standing on. Ask 10 people if they're rich, and 9 of them will laugh because they're picturing the top of the ladder, not the rung they're on right now. There are 8 levels between broke and untouchable, and the honest truth is most people spend their whole life climbing without ever being told the levels exist. Nobody hands you a map at 18. You just start working, start paying bills, start guessing, and the guessing never really stops unless somebody forces you to sit down and count. So before you decide where you think you are, sit with this. The gap between level 1 and level 2 isn't more money. It's one number, checked once, that most people are too scared to check at all. Stick around for all 8, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly which rung is yours, and more importantly, exactly what it takes to get to the next one. A quick note before we start climbing: none of these 8 levels care what you drive, what neighborhood you live in, or what your job title says on a business card. Plenty of people who look rich from the outside are sitting on level 1 or 2 the entire time, one bad month away from the whole picture collapsing, and plenty of people who look completely ordinary are sitting on level 5 or 6 without a single person around them knowing it. The ladder doesn't care about appearances. It only cares about the number, and the number doesn't lie the way a driveway or wardrobe can. One more thing before we climb. None of these 8 levels are permanent. People slide backward as often as they climb forward. A job loss or a medical bill or a bad year can knock someone from level 4 back to level 2 almost overnight. That's not a failure of the ladder. That's just what the ladder is built to show you honestly. It doesn't judge. It just tells you where you're standing today, so you can decide what to do about it tomorrow. Level 1 has a sound, the notification that hits your phone 2 days before rent is due, and you already know your balance can't cover it. This is the line where a single missed shift, a single car repair, a single late paycheck doesn't just hurt, it cascades. You're not choosing between wants here. You're choosing which bill waits. Groceries get smaller before rent gets late because rent late means eviction, and groceries late just means a bad week. The credit card isn't a convenience at this level, it's a shock absorber, and it's already maxed. Picture the exact moment, standing at a gas pump, running the number in your head before you even swipe, because if it declines in front of the person in line behind you, that's its own kind of damage. Millions of people work full-time jobs and live exactly here, one missed paycheck from a bounced check, and the terrifying part isn't the number in the account. It's that there's no margin at all between today and disaster. The way out of level 1 isn't a bigger paycheck, not at first. It's $100 that never gets touched, sitting untouched for 30 straight days. That's the whole test. Most people never pass it, not because they can't, but because nobody ever told them that number was the actual finish line. Level 2 feels like relief until you actually look at it closely. The bill's clear. Every single month, on time, without drama. You could almost call that stability, except there's still nothing behind it. A $400 car repair doesn't threaten eviction anymore, but it does wreck your week, your month, sometimes your quarter. You're not drowning here. You're treading water. And treading water is exhausting precisely because it never stops. The paycheck arrives, the bills leave, and the balance at the end looks the same as it did 30 days ago. This is the level where "I'm fine" gets said the most and believed the least, because fine isn't the same as safe, and everyone at this level already knows the difference, even if they don't say it out loud. This is also where the trap lives, the one nobody warned you about. A raise at this level almost never becomes savings. It becomes a slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer car payment, and the treading water just moves to a higher, more expensive pool. The only way level 2 actually ends is a decision made on paper, in writing, before the raise even lands. The next extra dollar doesn't get to choose where it goes. You already decided in advance that it goes to level 3. Level 3 is the first level that has a real number attached to it, and the number is boring on purpose. 3 to 6 months of expenses, sitting untouched, doing nothing except existing. The first time you hit this number, Nothing about your life looks different from the outside. You still go to the same job. You still eat the same lunch. But something shifts internally because now a surprise bill is annoying instead of catastrophic. The car repair still costs the same $400. It just doesn't cost you your sleep anymore. Think about what that actually buys you. A bad boss stops being a life sentence because for the first time you could survive quitting without a plan. A layoff stops being a five-alarm fire and becomes an inconvenience with a runway attached to it. This is the quietest level to reach and the hardest to explain to anyone who hasn't reached it because it doesn't look like wealth. It looks like nothing happening, which is exactly the point. People who built this cushion describe the same strange side effect. They stop checking their balance out of fear and start checking it out of curiosity. And that one shift in why you're looking is the actual marker that you've crossed the line. Level 4 is the day the last high interest balance hits zero. Not the mortgage, not the car note. If the rate is reasonable, but the actual expensive debt, the kind charging you 20, 25, 30% a year just to exist. The day that number disappears, something changes in the math that most people never notice happening in real time. Every dollar you earn from that point forward is entirely yours, not partially yours after a minimum payment, entirely yours. People who reach this level often describe it as quieter than they expected. No fireworks, just a statement that says zero, where a balance used to be, and a strange, unfamiliar sensation of a paycheck that doesn't have somewhere else. It has to go first. Run the actual math on what that interest was costing. A single maxed card at 28% isn't just an inconvenience. It's a second rent payment, invisible, recurring, going to a bank instead of a landlord. Level 4 isn't about being debt-free forever. Some of the wealthiest people alive still carry a mortgage. It's about being free of the debt that was actively working against you every single month, whether you were paying attention to it or not. Level 5 is where the math starts doing work you can't see happening. This is the point where if you stopped contributing to your investments entirely today, walked away completely, the money already in motion would still be enough to fund your retirement on its own, just from compounding over the decades ahead. Most people who hit this level don't feel it because nothing about today changes. You still go to work tomorrow, but somewhere in a spreadsheet, a future version of you just got secured on autopilot without needing another dollar of new money ever again. Here's the part that actually matters. Reaching this level has almost nothing to do with income and everything to do with time. Money put in at 25 does more work than triple the money put in at 45. Not because of luck, but because compounding needs decades to actually compound. That's why the people who hit level 5 earliest are rarely the highest earners. They're just the ones who started the clock first. It's the least visible level and arguably the most important one because it's the first time the math is working harder than you are. Level 6 is the one everyone actually means when they say financial independence, and it's stricter than people think. This isn't retirement money sitting untouched for 40 years. This is your assets generating enough right now, today, to cover your actual real expenses without a paycheck. Not someday, now. The distance between level 5 and level 6 is enormous because level 5 is a promise to future you and level 6 is a check that clears this month. Work becomes optional at this level. Not impossible, not undesirable, just optional. And optional changes everything about how a bad day at a job feels because for the first time, staying is a choice instead of a requirement. The number itself is simpler than it sounds. Take your yearly expenses, multiply by roughly 25, and that's the rough target most people who reach level 6 actually hit before they got there, give or take, depending on how it's invested. It's a big number for almost everyone. It's also the only level on this entire ladder that fully removes an employer's leverage over your time, and that alone is why people chase it decades before they ever plan to stop working entirely. Level 7 is the level almost nobody talks about accurately, because from the outside it looks identical to level 6. The difference is entirely internal. The question, can I afford this, stops being the question you ask. It gets replaced by, do I actually want this? Which sounds like a small shift and is actually enormous, because most financial stress for most of human history has been rooted in that first question. At this level, a bad month in the market doesn't change your grocery store. A big, unexpected expense doesn't require a spreadsheet. Money hasn't disappeared as a concept, but it stopped being the variable that decides what happens next in your life. And that particular silence is what people are actually describing when they say someone is rich. It shows up in small, strange places. Not checking a price tag before picking something up, not doing math in your head at a restaurant, not flinching when a flight gets rebooked at a worse fare. None of that is dramatic. That's the whole point. The absence of a flinch is the entire level. Level 8 isn't really the same game anymore, and that's the part that surprises people. This is generational wealth, the kind measured across decades and family names instead of a single lifetime, the kind with family offices, trusts, and structures built specifically so the money outlives the person who made it. At this level, spending isn't really the mechanism of wealth anymore. Influence is. What gets built, what gets funded, what institutions exist because a single family decided they should. A wing of a hospital, an endowed scholarship, a building with a name on it that isn't for sale, these are Level 8's actual currency, not a bigger house or a faster car. It's a different rule set entirely, governed less by a number in an account and more by what that number can move in the world. There's also a quiet tension almost nobody outside Level 8 ever sees. The same structures built to protect the money from taxes and lawsuits also tend to distance the family from the very people who once relied on them, and that trade gets made deliberately, generation after generation. Almost nobody reading this is at Level 8, and that's fine, because Level 8 was never really the point of the ladder. The point of the ladder was never the top rung. It was knowing which one you're actually standing on right now. Today, honestly, without the flattering story you tell people at parties. Most people misjudge their own level by 2 or 3 rungs in either direction, usually because they're comparing their Level 1 reality to somebody else's level. 6 highlight reel, curated, edited, and missing every single struggle that got them there. Here's the uncomfortable part. The internet mostly shows you levels 6 through 8 because that's what gets watched. And almost nobody posts about the quiet grind of levels 2 and 3, which is exactly where most people actually are. That gap between what you see online and what's real is doing more damage to how people feel about money than the money itself ever does. The actual useful move isn't memorizing 8 definitions. It's the 5 minutes it takes to check your real number. Tonight, no filter, no story, and place yourself honestly on the ladder you're actually climbing. If you landed on level 1 or 2 while watching this, that's not a verdict, it's just a starting point. And every single person on level 7 or 8 started on a lower rung than the one you're standing on right now. If you landed higher than you expected, that's worth noticing too, because it means the story you've been telling yourself about your own finances has been more pessimistic than the actual numbers. Either way, the ladder doesn't move. Only you do. Because the gap between where you think you are and where you actually are is the only gap that's ever been optional to close. Go check your real number tonight. Not the number you'd say out loud at a party, the actual one, sitting quietly in an account you probably haven't opened in a while. Whatever rung it puts you on, that's not the end of the story. It's just the first honest sentence of it. And if you made it this far, you already know more about where you actually stand than most people ever bother to find out. That alone puts you ahead. Not because knowing the number changes it overnight, but because you can't climb a rung you refuse to look at. Subscribe if you want to see where the next story on this channel picks up, and drop your honest level in the comments if you're brave enough. No judgment either. If this kind of quiet arithmetic is your kind of story, the subscribe button is right there, and it costs exactly nothing, which is the best price this channel knows. A new one arrives tomorrow. Same time, same desk, different machine.